Appreciate you being on Sit for the Task. Alex, always a hard man to track down, but we finally got you.
That's true.
But actually, just on a bike ride.
Yep, just finished up. Good 13 and a half miles. So,
I, it's incredible to me that, I mean, obviously it's a little bit different. People run, 13 miles, and like that seems
yeah,
insane
that's
too.
insane.
But like on a bike, you can kind of go, a little bit quicker. But kind of leads me into the topic of discussion for today, I guess, would just kind of be if someone were to be getting into biking, obviously you not necessarily professional, but something that you really enjoy doing, something you get out there and you do pretty
Yeah.
often. Where do you start, and why did you get into it?
Ooh, okay. So where do you start? I would say, I mean, the first thing that would come to mind is what type of biking are you going to do? But I would step back maybe one step before that and say, um, what is it that drove you to want to bike in the first place?
Right.
Why are you looking at buying a bike? There's some more powerful like passion behind that other than I want to do this specific biking. Okay, what led you to that? Because I think some people have a misconception that they want to do a certain type of biking and it might not fit them. So
Right.
it might not be the best bike for them. They might just be getting into it because someone else did or something of that sort. So
Right.
I think what drove you to want to get a bike in the first place?
Yeah. So, well, I guess for me, because I am actually looking for a bike,
Right.
would be something that I could put some miles on, something that it more of a recreational activity as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to really getting into it. I figure that kind of just more like a starter type thing where
Right.
I can ride on the pavement a little bit, ride off road, maybe just like paths and trails and stuff like that. But something that I could just get some mileage on.
Okay. And I know you have a little bit of background more so on the road biking side.
Mm-hmm. Well, a little bit. I mean, I just used to bike. Well, this is probably 5 or 6 years ago now, but probably used to bike about 25 miles, 3 to 5 times a week.
Yeah, it's a pretty good amount of riding.
You know, but also when I was doing that, felt, I don't want to say under equipped, but felt like the bike like I just kind of hopped on and started, and it
Mm-hmm.
kind of even led me to being like, yeah, I don't really want to do this anymore, just because the bike kind of always felt uncomfortable,
Right.
shifted kind of funny, and I guess for me, road biking for more of a fitness realm would probably be the best bet, but your background and sort of expertise per se is more along the lines of the mountain biking.
Right.
So I can obviously see if someone were to be getting into biking, it just like kind of just depends on the style bike, or I guess I wouldn't really know where to start when I was
Right.
picking something out.
So, okay, let's look at one of the things you asked me. So we can look at what got me into biking. We can look at what you got you into biking,
Right.
or kind of go
Sure.
along with what you're looking at right now. So first thing for me was I'd say my first real bike. I mean, I had bikes growing up. We just had whatever, whatever was a cheap Walmart bike,
Right.
and
Right.
I didn't know any different for a long time until my brother went to school in the middle of West Virginia and had nothing else to do except mountain biking and rock climbing.
Of course.
So he kind of got me started on it, and I still didn't know much about it, and he wanted to get me involved with it so that he had another person to ride with too. And so he had a pretty nice bike at the time. Um, it was probably a Gary Fisher, which is a line of Trek, and that's
Okay. I didn't even know that.
yeah. Gary Fisher's kind of being phased out a little bit. They kind of just put the Trek brand on now, but
Mm-hmm.
it still is pretty much a specialty of like Gary Fisher is the specialty line of Trek. Gary Fisher was a mountain biker who just gained popularity.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, I think that's what what he started with, and that's what I'm familiar with because my first bike was a Gary Fisher, probably driven by my brother. So I got it for Christmas or something one year, and I thought it was the coolest thing. I got this new mountain bike, and had what I thought was a decent suspension on the front end, the fork on the front. It was a hardtail, which means there's no suspension in the rear, which was fine for me at the time. It was a very small frame. So these are things I picked up on along the way.
Right.
As I'm riding it, I start to realize, I don't know whether I tested somebody else's bike out or if I just realized like, hey, I'm really beating this thing up, the type of riding I'm doing. So as I got more involved riding mountain bike trails, I started to realize, hey, you got to hop over that log. You can't just step over it every time.
Right.
Or, there's drops built into the trail. So basically you got flat coming up and then you have, a couple foot drop.
Right.
It's like running off the edge of a cliff. It's not necessarily a jump, but you have to hit it just right. So you're pulling up on the handlebars and kind of keeping yourself flat as you go through. So you start hitting more of that type of stuff. You're hitting a lot of rocks. You could be riding through rock gardens. Then you're starting to think, what if I'm going to do this type of riding, what about a full suspension bike?
Right.
So these are kind of thought processes along the way. Another thing I noticed, my SR Suntour front suspension was not that great, and I tried to pull it apart and clean it one time, and it really didn't make it any better. It's just basically a spring in there. There's not really, I think some of the higher ends.
Suntour, is that like the brand that was on Gary Fisher then? Okay.
SR Suntours, it's just a brand of suspension. The only reason I know of it is because it was on my first bike.
And you tore it apart.
Yeah. So, it'll come on a lower end mountain bike. So this is like entry level. This is the Gary Fisher line of Trek. So it's a good line of mountain bike, but you're at the very low end of it. We're talking $400.
Okay.
So you're a step above the Walmart bikes for sure. I mean, several steps above.
Right.
But you're still like just scratching the surface of mountain biking. So I now have what is part of the Gary Fisher line. It's the Superfly, and they make the Superfly in a hardtail or a full suspension.
So so then what's the difference between hardtail and full suspension?
So, practically speaking, the reason a lot of people want a hardtail is because if you're going, what happens is if you're going up a hill, if you're doing a lot of mountain biking, you're probably going uphill unless you're a strict downhiller, and you wouldn't even consider a hardtail.
Right.
So this is for cross country. There's different styles of biking. So you got cross country, you got straight downhill. Those are kind of the two extremes of mountain biking, and then anywhere in between you could call it enduro, all mountain. There's different terms for it.
Right.
But it's that bikes are just like graduated steps. There's so many in between bikes now.
Right.
And we can get to that more later. But even within the realm of mountain biking, there's all different variations.
Right.
So back to your question, if you're going uphill a lot, cross country rider, as you're pedaling, you're kind of bouncing. Okay, so now the energy you're putting into each pedal stroke is now going into the suspension instead of propelling you forward.
Instead of going up. Okay.
So that's one thing you lose a little bit, and that's what a lot of people don't like about a full suspension. That's really the main complaint. Otherwise, it's a smoother ride. You can hit things a little harder. You can roll over things a little better.
So hardtail is just the front suspension, and then nothing in the back.
Yeah, and actually there are people out there that ride a rigid bike, which I would never do that on a mountain bike trail. But there are people that ride a rigid, and I talked to somebody last year who had a certain type. I think it was a Surly was the the brand of bike,
Mm-hmm.
and he was like really putting out claims that this thing absorbed everything, even though it was a rigid frame. The
Meaning no suspension.
geometry, yeah, no suspension at all. But he said the geometry of it, whatever it was, it just kind of flexed so that you're going over stuff, and it did not feel like a rigid bike. So
I find
there's
that hard to
there's a lot of
believe. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of technology out there. I'm sure they've gotten better at making bikes since the original mountain bikes that were probably an adaptation of a Walmart bike that they realized, hey, we're going down this mountain and my bike fell apart by the bottom. We need to do something here, and that's kind of how the whole line of mountain bikes came out, and now we got all kinds of brands, but yeah, so that's so suspension's a big thing. Um, I failed to mention my original mountain bike had 26-inch wheels on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For starting out, that could be okay, especially if you're a smaller guy like me.
Mm-hmm.
I had a really small frame. If your frame's too big, you're not going to be able to handle the bike as well.
Right.
And sometimes, especially starting out, you might want that seat a little lower. To be an efficient rider, you want the seat higher, not too high. You want your knee to basically have just a slight bend at the bottom of your stroke, and that goes for mountain biking and road biking.
And
More
many
so for
biking
road
in between.
biking.
Right.
Mountain biking, you might want to sit a little lower because, like I said, you're going over a lot of stuff. You might want to sit a little lower. You don't want to have your weight going over the handlebars.
Right.
You want to have some clearance so you're not sitting on your seat when you land. So yeah, you're gonna sit a little lower in a mountain bike. So I had a little smaller frame. I had smaller wheels, kind of go hand in hand. You're closer to step off. So wheel size is definitely something you want to consider. Now that I have a 29-inch wheel, you hear people say 29er. That's what they're saying. I don't think I would ever go back to a 26-inch wheel. It worked for me at the time. You have a little more agility, I guess, a little more maneuverability.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have as wide a wheelbase, so you could imagine some tight turns. You're going to go through them a little better with a 26-inch wheel.
So I guess it's almost a similar concept to like a car. Now, obviously, like we don't think about like a bike because they seem so narrow anyway. But obviously, the wider or larger tire that you have, the better handling. I mean, it's the same thing as like drag, almost like drag slicks. Nice wide, they grip the ground and they can propel you faster, and it's going to be better handling. Left and right are going to be a different tread compound or whatever, but it's same sort of concept then with
I guess
with
kind
mountain
of
biking
a little
or
bit of the inverse of that. So you're talking like wide, or what I'm talking about is the actual diameter
okay.
of the wheel. So that's at 26-inch diameter or 29-inch diameter. So if you have a 29-inch diameter, you have a wider wheelbase. You're not going to be able to hit those turns as tight.
You mean wider as in like
Yeah, wider
Okay.
wheelbase. So
Okay,
from
yeah.
front wheel
Okay.
to back of back
that
wheel.
that makes
Yeah,
sense.
sorry.
Okay.
Um,
No, that's my fault.
but yeah. So that's one small benefit of a 26-inch wheel, but I think the benefits of a larger wheel far outweigh that one small benefit because you're going up hills. I think something that people don't realize is how much momentum you carry with a larger wheel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's physics, but like you don't know the effect it has until you ride one and then ride the other.
Right.
And that that's more. I think I noticed that more with road biking. We can get into that, but right now on mountain biking, you're gonna roll over so much more stuff on a 29-inch. You're gonna roll over logs that you would have never thought of getting over with a 26-inch wheel. It's gonna raise you off the ground. You're not gonna hit your chain as much. Your chain ring sits right down there by your pedals. You're gonna be a lot closer to this stuff. You're not gonna go over as high at logs.
Now,
without catching that.
Do they make 29-inch bikes or 29-inch wheelbase bikes? Whatever it is, in a more beginner model, or is that something that you can kind of
I think
substitute in?
you're
Or
probably not going to find too many 26-inch wheels in a higher end bike.
okay,
Now, the reason I bring that up is, okay, for one, you're asking about entry level,
mm-hmm.
so that might be a consideration for an entry level, and you're gonna get a lower cost bike
Sure,
if you're looking at that wheel size,
mm-hmm.
so that's a benefit too. Now they make 27 and a half wheels, and that was something that came up, within the past. I don't know. I might be I might be wrong, but I'd say over the past 5 or 10 years, they started coming out with those.
Right,
It was a newer thing, and some people like that balance. So you're still able to roll over some things, but you gain a little bit of that handling.
right,
And then there's the 26, or what is it, 27 and a half plus. So now you're putting thicker tires on there.
okay,
So thicker tires, you get a little more drag, but you're on a mountain bike, so you're getting to get better traction.
sure,
You're gonna get a little bit of it's gonna absorb more as you land on rocks and roots.
mm-hmm.
So it kind of adds to your suspension a little too,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you want to ride a rigid.
Right.
You might want some bigger tires on there.
Right, right.
So, man, there's a lot of things you need to consider when you're looking at a bike, and there's a lot of variabilities that there's any kind of variation out there. Heck, you could build a bike if you wanted, if you really wanted to.
Right. So so if someone was even building a bike, right? Probably not something you want to do for your first bike, because
No.
how do you know?
No, you're not going to have a clue.
Yeah. How do you know what to do?
You want to go in there and basically figure out, okay, do you want a mountain bike? Maybe I'm diving a little too far into the mountain bike, but these are good considerations in kind of the process I went through in the as I rode more. But I mean, just going back to the basics. If you're looking to get a mountain bike, you're looking at wheel size, you're looking at frame size, you want a bike that'll fit you.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably not looking at tires. You can buy any tire and put it on your bike.
Right.
You're probably not looking a whole lot into wheel width.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're like, you want to go gung-ho downhilling, and that's what you want to do.
Right.
You're going to want a thicker tire, but that kind of goes with the bike that you buy.
Right.
The bike is going to be built for a specific purpose, and it's not going to have like one thing built for downhill and another thing built for cross country. It's not the way it works.
So what should people look for in terms of a budget? So if someone is looking at, we'll start off at like the $500 options, and then we'll say realistically, I mean a beginner's bike, would you say like you probably just find used for at least under $1,000 before you would really start getting into like some serious mountain bikes for your very first bike or first mountain bike?
That's a good question. So, like I said, my first bike was probably $400. That's a brand new bike. Okay. So, if you want a really low end bike, still in the realm. I mean, this could probably apply for road bike or somewhere in between as well. You're gonna get the basics at that price range, or what you're talking about is buying a bike off of somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you're gonna get a little bit better quality bike. It's gonna be used, it's gonna be worn. You might have to do maintenance on it, but you're gonna have better quality components on there. And what I mean by that is your whole shifting setup, your whole drivetrain is gonna be, higher end shifters are just going to be a lot smoother. You're not gonna have the issues of losing your chain and not being able to shift if it's adjusted properly, of course. But you're just gonna have a whole lot less of those issues. You're not gonna your chain's probably not gonna stretch as much. I mean, chains stretch, but just trying to think between the different tiers.
So in other words, you could go $400 or $500, buy a brand new bike, and
It'd be passable.
passable.
So the other thing with my original bike is I had a very basic gearing setup. And this would be another thing to consider. How many gears do you want on your bike?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I had three front chain rings, so that's your front sprocket basically. That's right there with your cranks.
Right.
On your pedals. So I could jump. That's like your big jump. Okay, so if you really want to pedal a lot faster, say you're going downhill, you're jumping up to the bigger ring, and vice versa. If you're climbing a hill, you want to be in that small ring.
Right.
And it's the opposite in the back. So I probably had 7 in the back.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at one point, I had a buddy in college that was a bike tech. He just had parts sitting around, so I bent my wheel. He threw a new wheel on for me. Well, it had a different cassette attached to it.
Right.
Cassette is the back set of sprockets.
Okay.
It comes as one piece.
Okay.
So yeah, that's your cassette.
That comes with the back wheel. Like that's.
It doesn't have to.
Okay, but.
There's a quick attachment, but he already had it set up.
Sure.
It was an upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe it had 10 gears on it,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it was. And all I had to do is buy a different shifter, and for $50 or so, and I had an upgrade on my wheels. I had an upgraded drivetrain.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was better components. It was a better shifter.
Right.
So that's what I'm talking about. Without trying to dive too far into the details.
Okay. Yeah. So in other words, if you were mentioning to a beginner, hey, I want to buy this bike. Obviously, I would say that probably steer clear from the Walmart bikes.
Yes.
Just don't.
Yeah, Walmart bikes, I guess, have their place. They're a cheap bike that you can get for somebody if they're just trying to get from point A to point B. I think where you're going with this is people that want to. This is either a hobby, this is a fitness goal, or or they're outright. It's a sport,
Right.
So that's the people you're talking about. And even if you're at a beginner's level, you
Mm-hmm.
can still be aiming for it as a sport.
Right. But looking for something like on Craigslist or Facebook or something like that.
There's we can take a dive into my road biking.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think this is actually a very good other side of the spectrum, how I progressed through road biking, because I learned a lot about different bikes when I started road biking. But the bike that I have now, that is a pure road bike, I actually bought on Craigslist.
Mm-hmm.
It was, it probably had a few years on it, good bit of miles, but it was in good shape. And I bought it from a bike tech. I knew he took care of it. I could see it, it was in good shape. And I probably got it. And this is a legitimate road bike for $600, somewhere around there. And brand new, that might have been a $1,200 bike.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the range you're looking at. It's a legitimate road bike.
Sure.
Maybe on the lower end, but it was a pretty good bike. It's an aluminum frame, so that's something I didn't talk about. There's, you can have an aluminum frame or carbon fiber frame.
Yeah.
So that bike actually has a carbon front fork, so it's a little bit lighter than your just your average aluminum frame bike.
But for most people, just regular aluminum would be fine, or
yeah. So road biking's a little different. You don't have the front suspension on a road bike.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get an aluminum frame, it's not like you're adding a ton of weight on the front fork. You're not
sure.
saving a ton of weight there.
Right.
Now mine, I think, is on the front fork, and then actually the back, the back part of the frame that comes down to your back wheel.
Mm-hmm.
Believe that is also carbon on mine. But that's another consideration. But Yeah, that's kind of the price range. So yeah, I got a bike for half price. You know, a really good bike. It's had some use. I probably had to I had to change the front shifter once because it snapped on me. It was
Mm-hmm.
really kind of a freak thing.
Right.
That's about all I've done with that bike.
Right.
You know, I haven't had to make a lot of changes. I don't beat it up like my mountain bike.
Right.
You know, I'm not running over roots and rocks and things like that. I've maybe replaced the tires on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that most people that, listen to this, or, that go onto our website or whatever, it's something that they might not be looking at professional level, but they
Right.
want something that's nice, and they want something that isn't going to absolutely break the bank. I mean, obviously, mountain bikes can get upwards, 5, 6, 7 grand.
It
Road
doesn't
bikes can go
doesn't
well
matter.
north of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well north of that. And, but I think another sort of barrier to entry. I mean, this is the same thing. I was actually, when I talked to Jeff too, sort of a barrier to entry in fitness is, you do a workout,
Hmm.
and then you're in pain, and then you don't want to work out anymore. And I guess in terms of biking, that can have the same effect where it's, I bought this bike, it breaks all the time, and I don't want to fix it, therefore I don't want to ride anymore.
Right.
So finding something that is,
So that's why we steer clear of Walmart bikes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And yeah, if you're looking at Craigslist, you got to take the same precautions as you would if you were buying a vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't want to. If you go up there and you see the chains all rusted on it, you might want to think, well, did they really take care of this?
Right.
You look at it, and you know all the parts. You look at the drivetrain. You're looking at the sprockets and the chain. They're well oiled. They look like they're in good shape. I mean, I think the average person can tell when something's like totally rusted out, or
Right.
if it looks like it's in decent shape.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just like any other purchase where you're buying from somebody else used. I mean, you definitely want to look at it. You want to ride it. You want to test out the size. You know, make sure it's a good fit for you. Adjust the
Mm-hmm.
seat around. Um, but yeah, I think it's a very good way to get a bike. Now, if you're a very new beginner, you might not know as much. When you go to check it out, you might be a little hesitant to do that
Mm-hmm.
versus going to a bike shop and talking it through with someone there
Okay.
that
I
knows.
didn't even dawn on me to think about that. So
Yeah,
like that's
I mean, it's the same thing if you buy a car. You go to the dealer, yeah, they might upsell you, but at the same time, they're going to give you a lot of good information about that bike.
right.
They're going to help you kind of sort out which bike you you want for what you want to do.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
then,
mean, that's even something that you can go. I mean, you could go into a dealer and have no intention of buying a bike there,
mm-hmm.
and they'll kind of walk you through. That's sort of it's a sales hack that you could do. It's a little bit easier. But I mean, you could also do that. You know, if you find a used car, go to the dealer that actually sells that. They'll tell you the ins and outs and everything about that car, that
Right.
specific model, and then you can say, "Thank you very much. I don't think I can afford this brand new,
Sure.
but now I know what to look for in used models."
Right.
So
Yeah, yeah, you could do that. Talk to your friends if you know anybody that bikes. Yeah. I don't know if you want to go back to like I know we're kind of diving down details here. If
yeah.
you want to reframe,
Well, yeah. I mean, it's. I guess where I would like to go is that's. I guess I specifically have a background in road biking.
right.
I'm kind of looking for the fitness realm, put miles on the bike, and what to look for in my next one. But then also, I think now since I've had the Walmart bike experience. I've had the decent road bike sort of hand-me-down experience that didn't fit.
Mm-hmm.
Now my next bike, I'm going after something that I want to hop on and I want to go on every single day. So when you think of a commuter bike or something like the word hybrid gets tossed around in the
Yeah.
bike industry a lot. what does that mean? Would you say it's better to find, sort of a bike of a jack of all trades, or maybe you just kind of pinch your pennies a little bit and do one or the other, or do you kind of just have both? What?
Yeah, so I guess that that really goes back to that original question. I mean, how into this thing are you going to get?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to ride roads and light trails? Are you going to solely ride rails to trails type of trail,
Mm-hmm.
where you got like cinders, it's relatively flat?
Mm-hmm.
Are you only going to ride road bike? Are you serious about this? You want to go, you want a light bike that's going to go pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
Um, are you sure that you want to go on trails and then maybe get more into mountain biking?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just ride rails trails? Or do you want to go full out, excuse me, mountain bike? Or maybe you just want to be a downhiller and
Mm-hmm.
you want the beefiest mountain bike. You don't care what it weighs, and you want to
Right.
put the biggest travel suspension that you can find.
Right.
So that's kind of like the levels that you can look at.
Mm-hmm.
So starting from one end of the spectrum to the other, full out road bike. I mean, we just talked about that. Obviously, carbon fiber is going to be your lightest, best choice. You're going to have yeah, I don't. I know I have a road bike, but I couldn't tell you each individual component. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I can name a few, but it's not really gonna add to anything.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a base of road bike that you see. I mean, you could look at it and be like, that's a road bike. It has the curved handlebars.
Right.
It's got the
Right.
drops on it.
Right.
But then, okay, so you take the next step. You say, well, I want to ride roads sometimes, and I might take it on rails trails
Mm-hmm.
type of thing. So you're kind of stepping into that hybrid range a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, it's thrown around in um, a normal hybrid bike, like just your basic bike with straight handlebars
Mm-hmm.
and maybe front suspension, maybe not. That's kind of been phased out because there's so many steps in between now.
Right.
You can basically get, like I said, get any combination. So if I'm looking at, uh, if I want to do, like I said, some road, um, if I want to go long distance, or if I'm only going to ride this 30 miles
Mm-hmm.
at one time and then wait a month, you know,
Right.
or am I going to ride this thing every day? Then you want to look a little more into the durability.
Right.
You want to look into the weight of it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're riding it more, you're going to want it to be a better ride.
So I guess
Um,
so more vagueness. What brands?
Brands,
What do you, what are we talking here? Like what are brands that you trust? Like more like
so
big box
I've said
brands? Or,
Trek.
yeah.
Trek, I would trust Trek across the board
Mm-hmm.
with any type of bike. They have a really good line for mountain biking. They have some hybrid stuff that's in between. I rode one. I used to do this ride every summer, a fundraiser, and that's what got me into road biking. And that was after I learned not to take a mountain bike after my my first attempt at that. um, then I rode a hybrid, and it was 10 times better.
Right.
Was it to the level of my road bike now? No, I wouldn't have bought my road bike now if it
Right.
was.
Right.
So uh, but that was a Trek. So
Mm-hmm.
and it was an old Trek. And,
Right.
I mean they're built well.
Mm-hmm.
Trek's a good brand. Um, I mean Giant is a pretty well known brand. You'll see it everywhere. I mean Cannondale's like a really high end. You're paying a little more for that. They have mountain biking and road biking. They're known more for the road biking, but
Mm-hmm.
they do have both. You probably won't find too much in between with them though.
Right.
Trek's more like an all-encompassing brand. They have both ends of the spectrum, and they're also like your everyday. Um, what's another good one? Diamondback. They're more for mountain biking.
Mm-hmm.
They have some decent mountain bikes. Anywhere from beginner on up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some other ones I've seen. Specialized. You see Specialized everywhere. I think I don't know if this is still true, but they used to have the connotation that if you buy Specialized, you have to get the special parts. Specialized
Okay.
owns everything that's on that bike, so
Mm-hmm.
now you have to specifically buy the Specialized shifter, for example, instead of going to Shimano or SRAM.
Okay.
So that was something that maybe steered people away, but the thing is, they're a good bike.
Right.
There's no denying that it's a good bike,
Mm-hmm.
and that's for road biking or for mountain biking. They have both.
Right. So it's kind of like, let's kind of switch on a tangent here, because when you get into biking, very rarely is it an individual thought. You're not just thinking, oh, I just want to get into biking and that's what I want to do. It's typically either someone told you,
Yeah.
or you want to ride with a group, or you want to go and do some different things. I mean, you've kind of been on all different ends of,
Yeah.
the between road biking events and mountain biking events. You're wearing a Moab shirt. I mean, you went out to Moab to do some mountain
Yeah.
biking out there, and that's a fun time. So I guess,
Awesome place.
what are your experiences just biking in groups as opposed to just even biking by yourself? Like, the appeal to getting a bike is obviously, you get a bike, but then to progress in the sport or progress more as a biker, probably be advantageous to get some people around you that also
Sure.
enjoy doing it.
Yeah, so I've seen a little bit of both ends of that as well. So I'm thinking when I started mountain biking, I probably just rode with my brother. I didn't really ride on my own. Just around,
Right.
I would ride with my brother, and then I was in college at the time, so there was a friend of mine, same one I mentioned earlier, who actually started a mountain biking group at Geneva, where I went to college.
Yeah, yeah.
So I kind of got in with that crowd. I was like, hey, I got a mountain bike. I want to
Mm-hmm.
join this crew. And, it was a small group. It was
Mm-hmm.
probably only like 5 to 10 people that even joined it, and then less of those that rode consistently.
Right, right.
But I would ride with those guys, just a couple of us. And,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of how it goes for mountain biking. You get
Mm-hmm.
a small group of 3 to 5 guys. That's pretty typical.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good. If you're mountain biking, you'll kind of ride together for a while. You'll start to separate,
Mm-hmm.
and the lead guy may may hold up, and you kind of all catch your breath and
Right.
get on the same page again. You talk about the trail a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
How your bike's doing.
Right.
And there's always a guy that really knows bikes, like in. I mean, he's just really in tune with his own bike, or just knows what your bike might need.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you're shifting a little bit. I noticed your chain was popping off.
Mm-hmm.
We might want to adjust that gear, or hey, your chain's popping off while you're going over bumps. That shouldn't be happening. Your components are probably worn out.
Right,
It's
right.
not staying on the track anymore.
Right.
So things like that, people can tell your riding style. They can say, hey, you're sitting a little low in your seat. I can tell. Hey, are your knees hurting because
Mm-hmm.
you're sitting really low in your seat?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh yeah, my knees are hurting.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and people that have been biking long enough with other people are gonna notice those things and say, hey, something looks a little bit off.
Mm-hmm.
Let's adjust this and see how you feel. So that's a really good benefit. But on the road biking side, similar things to that. People are gonna pick up on things like that. Hey, heck, your tire's low.
Mm-hmm.
Things that
Yeah.
you're just not paying attention to.
Right. And you wouldn't unless you knew, and
Right.
you wouldn't know any better.
Right. With road bike, I guess either one. It really depends. Do you have somebody that's the same pace as you? You kind of want to ride with somebody that's about your skill level.
Mm-hmm.
So you keep at least a somewhat consistent pace. You don't want one person like if you're like the really fast person and you're riding with somebody really slow, you're going to be sitting there waiting the whole time, or you're not going to have any fun.
Right.
If you're this really slow person and the fast person takes off every time and you're just trying to catch your breath, you're not going to have any fun. So neither person is really enjoying this.
Right.
You really want to find people that are on your same level, and you'll push each other. You'll get better with that person.
Right.
Because one person might be feeling good one day, and the other guy's trying to catch up and catch their breath, but they're keeping with them.
Right.
And then, the first guy can hold up and wait, okay, let's regroup, start on to the next part of the trail, or, let's do this next section on the road, whatever it is. Another aspect of road biking, I don't know whether I want to condone this or not, but setting pace lines. You see any professional bikers, they're setting pace lines. So that's when you got 4 bikers, or it could be more, it could be less, but they're all in this line, and they're very close together. And that's why I say I don't necessarily want to condone it. If you're really comfortable on your bike, you're really comfortable handling it, you've been biking a while, yeah, you could try it. But it is dangerous. There's no getting around that. There's certain ways you want to do that, but if you want to do that, I hope you know what you're doing before you attempt it. But that's when you're actually catching a draft off of the person in front of you, and you can get a pace line going. Man, you can really keep a good pace. I mean, you could fly. You could keep maybe like I'm trying to give a realistic example. In my trips to West Virginia, where I rode 250 miles through West Virginia, I mean, that's a lot of hills. I know one trip I had this goal to keep a 15 mile per hour average. That's pretty fast for that long of a ride.
Right.
At times you may go 18 to 20 on a flat. If you're in a pace line, you're probably keeping above 20, and you're really moving.
Yeah.
But the whole idea is that first person is really pushing that pace. I mean, they're grinding. So it's not that it's something that any one person can't do, but it's not something that someone can sustain. Right. So everyone else is just kind of taking it easy behind them. They're not catching any wind resistance.
Right.
And then what you do is the first person pulls for a while, maybe like 2 minutes or so. They'll drop back. Next person in line starts up. You may go 5 minutes.
Right.
Okay, time for you to drop back. The next person might go for 1 minute.
Right.
It comes
keep
into
cycling.
that varying skill level,
Yeah.
but everybody is kind of on the same pace still. It's similar. Blanking on the word,
Speed.
but yeah, skill level.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, you're
like I guess
it
it wouldn't matter too much, even if you have if everyone's about the same skill level, you're good. But it's sort of like the power of the pack type thing, where you're as good as like your worst person, but even your worst person can kind of stay within that line a little bit, or just go a minute, and
all you have to do is keep with the pace.
Right.
Keep in that window of draft, and you'll feel it when you fall off. It's like, oh man, I can't catch up now.
That's crazy.
And then when the same thing goes if you're coming up and you're like catching a pace line, which it can happen. You really grind and catch up to them. You'll feel it when you're in it, man. It's like, wow, it's got a lot easier all of a sudden.
Right.
I don't even have to pedal now. So yeah, it makes a huge difference. But that's just one aspect of riding with other people. I've had times where I was riding on the road and just carrying a conversation for 20 miles.
Right.
Riding side by side, and then a car comes up. Hey, let's get over. You get single file.
Right.
So, and that's another aspect of riding with people is, just calling things out. Hey, pothole.
Yeah.
Great. Gravel. Gravel's a dangerous one. You come up on a turn and gravel. Car back, car up. And those are really things to be conscious of on a road bike. You cannot predict drivers.
Right.
I think everybody knows that. But when you're on a bike, like some people, they really don't care that you're on the road. They're just gonna go wherever they were going. They're not gonna take any notice of you.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will try to run you off the road.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I haven't really had that. I've had some close mirrors
Right.
that I thought, man, that really could have clipped me there.
Yeah.
And I've seen some other people that have been run off the road.
Right.
Yeah, it's something to really be conscious of. If you're riding with other people, you can kind of alert each other to things like that.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about Moab.
Moab, oh man, it's got to be the best place I've ever gone to bike.
Yeah.
I haven't gone many places,
Mm-hmm.
given that. I went to Colorado once, but it was early on in my biking career, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
And, we only did about one trail out there, but Moab was a whole week dedicated to mountain biking. And you see a lot of different, I mean, it kind of looks the same. It's like a desert, but you can see a lot of different terrain out in Moab. So one of the first trails we did was what you think of like the kind of like a red golden rock, like the canyons. Like think of the Grand Canyon.
Right.
And that's where you drive down in. It looks like a canyon. And then you hit, I mean, it's all rock. It is all rock. And we're going up some of this stuff. This was the first day. We were climbing some things. I mean, sometimes it's like steps going up them.
Mm-hmm.
And really technical riding, going up over these rocks. And then when you came down the backside, it was kind of, I think that one was a little bit of like a loose rock, like, solid side, softball size rocks, or a little mixed in with some gravel.
Mm-hmm.
There might be some stretches where it's just stone, like a flat stone, kind of smooth. But then you get into, the next day, I think we did what they call the whole enchilada. Best trail I've ever ridden, by far. And they take you up in the shuttle. You start at the top. It's like downhill.
Right.
They take you up in a shuttle, but you can only go so far up on the mountain.
Right.
So they drop you off in the shuttle, and then you climb for another 2 miles or so. I forget what it was.
That's crazy.
But it was some steep stuff. Like, we saw some people going up there. We were like, man, I don't know if they're going to make it up this because the air starts getting a little thinner. By the top of it, we were probably 11,500 feet, I think. So you can feel the effects of it. And some of these sections, you actually couldn't ride. It was a hiking path.
Mm-hmm.
You had to hike your bike up it.
Right.
But yeah, you get to the top, you take a picture at the sign, and then you hit the descent. In that first section, I mean, it looked like you were like what I remember of Colorado. You're up in the pines. There's one mountain range in Moab,
right?
The La Salle Mountains, and that's where they take you. So when you start out, it's pines and brown dirt, and really steep, really tight switchbacks, kind of sketchy. A lot of roots, and then you come down through this next section. It's like this real smooth, similar like soft dirt.
Right.
Real smooth, flowing through the aspens. I mean, it's really cool. And then the next section you hit, it looks like a field. And it's, a little different type of dirt, but it's real fast and flowy. You get down a little further, then you're on like solid, like giant rock slabs. I mean, you're just riding over rock. It's a solid rock. I mean, it's something you would maybe hike through. And you're on the edge of a cliff. Like you can, I don't know how many times we stopped and like went over toward the edge of the cliff and like took a view of the, like the canyons around you.
Yeah.
I mean, you really on this, you really want to like stop and take it in on a trip like this.
Do you travel with your bike?
I rented a bike out there. So the bike I rented was a Santa Cruz. They're really good for exactly what we were doing. Like a more technical, partially downhill. It's a little more geared toward downhill, but they kind of hold that middle range where it's like a cross country bike, but like all mountain where they're. I want to say that most of them are full suspension bikes,
right?
If not all of them, and they have a little more travel. So that means like the distance that you can compress that
Right.
suspension before you're bottomed out.
Right.
So that's Santa Cruz. They're a very good brand as well. My brother has one now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, um,
But renting bikes is like, is that, I guess it's like a pretty normal thing to do? Is that like, that's something that...
well, you have two options. I mean, you can take your bike out there. Um, so my brother did that, for example.
Mm-hmm.
He had to get a case for it to take it on the airplane. It was a little bit of a hassle. So transportation is one thing. He basically had to tear that bike down and then rebuild it when he got there.
Right.
So that's one thing. Another thing is you're taking your own bike at your own risk. So what happened on the fifth day, or fourth or fifth day when we're down there, me and my brother riding, get to a certain spot on this trail. Oh, should we dive out here or should we continue on? Let's continue on. Next hill. I mean, did not take 30 seconds. I come around the bend and I see him halfway over the handlebars and bike comes down on a rock sideways and he had a carbon fiber frame.
Oh, man.
And you hit that on the wrong angle. You know, they're built for stiffness in a certain direction. You hit it on the wrong angle, you bust it. He busted the back end of his bike. Now, it worked out for him. I guess be a promoting Santa Cruz, but their customer service did well with him. It basically gave him an entire new frame.
Mm-hmm.
Because this was a really new bike
Right.
that he had. So it was certainly within that window for a warranty, but they took care of him. They sent him a new frame. He was very nervous
Yeah,
going into that. But if you have a 5-year-old bike, you know, you bust it, it's done.
Yeah.
That frame's gone.
Yeah.
No one's warranting that.
Yeah.
So it's a risk. It's a risk. It's a hassle. For me, I paid. I don't think it was $100 a day. Maybe like $70 a day. It might have even been $50 a day. I can't remember now. Then there's different levels based on the type of bike that you get. I got a little lower end. Lower end for Santa Cruz is really good.
Right.
So, but yeah, depending on the type of bike you want to get, it's a different price range. But I think it was somewhere in the range of like 50 to 70 a day, and then it might be a little bit better if you had it for the whole week, which we did.
Right.
So you consider that, you know, I want to pay. I don't know. I'll give you a big range, 300 to 500, whatever it is, for a whole week, riding out in some exotic place, or do I want to take my own bike? You know, in my case, my suspension was not built for that type of riding.
Right.
I might have really done some damage to my bike. I would have been bottoming out that suspension on every trail.
Right.
So it depends what you're doing.
Yeah.
I took my bike last year. We went down to North Carolina. I took it with me. It was easier on the transportation because it was a road trip.
Right.
But, you know, when we got down there, my bike was great for most trails. But we did hit one down in Carolina that was, I mean, I hit some rocks on there and like really came down one time. I came out of my clips on my pedals, and I mean, I bottomed out every suspension on that bike, and I thought, man, what did I break? So, it was like the limits for my bike, taking it on that trip, but I chose to take it.
So I guess clips. That's another thing I wanted to cover there too. That.
Yeah. I recommend them. There are different theories out there. When I first started getting into mountain biking, I did not want to do clips. I was terrified of them. I was like, you know, what if I'm falling and I need to catch myself?
That's what I say. Right? Yeah. What?
Then there's people that use flat pedals with the pegs. And I look at those things like, man, that is just good. That stitches in my shin. You know?
Right.
Those things are just gonna pull right up your shin and just tear into you. And that's happened to people I know. You know, even people that weren't into biking that much. So
Right.
we went up to this place up in Cleveland, a indoor mountain bike park. It's pretty sweet. It's called Ray's, and one of my buddies took a bike like that up there. He had to get stitches, busted up his shin on the pedal. So I'm not a fan of them. I know there's some people that really like it. Some downhillers like them
Mm-hmm.
because they want to be able to, let go of their bike if they need to.
Right. Bail.
And that's if you're like really hitting some jumps and
Mm-hmm.
things like that, you might want to be able to bail.
Right.
But for anything in between, you're just hitting some drops, you're doing some cross country riding, especially if you're on a road bike. There's no reason not to have clips.
Right.
I mean, the only time you gotta unclip, for the most part, is when you're stepping down. I know that you can get in some dangerous situations
Mm-hmm.
on a road bike for sure. But honestly, the first thing when I got clips, I didn't have a problem with them until I forgot that I was wearing them. So you're riding fine. You're like, yeah, this is no problem. I can unclip easy. You just tilt your foot, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not really a problem. And then you get a stop, and then you totally forget. Next thing you know, you're laying on your side. Oh, whoops! Once you're going, it's like I can't stop it now.
Right.
But I'd say that was the point for me, was when I went out to Colorado, like I said on that earlier trip in college. I had just started working with the clips.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did that downhill trail, I didn't wear them. I put on my flats for that because I was like, there's no way, I don't want to be attached to my bike.
Right.
What if I can't clip out? And we went to this other trail that was supposed to be an easier trail. And it ended up being one of the most technical things I've ever done. And you're like I said earlier, I mean, you're biking up steps pretty much in the rock. That's just the way the rock
Right.
is formed. And I remember getting stuck on one of those and falling. And mid fall, I was able to unclip my foot and catch myself. And that was the point where I was like, okay, I think we're good now. I'm gonna move forward with clips.
Right.
I'm comfortable with this. You feel so much more attached to the bike. You can maneuver a lot better. There's nothing worse than you're pedaling along or you're going down a downhill and it's bumpy, and your feet are coming off the pedals.
Yeah.
You have no control of that bike at that point.
Right.
So that's why some people go with the pegs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like them. I think they're dangerous in a different way.
Pegs just sound dangerous.
They are. If you're wearing pegs, buy some shin guards. They're cheap.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. It's personal preference. I would not wear your plastic, Walmart bike pedals. Get something a little more substantial. If you want to go with the pegs, the metal pedals with the pegs, I mean, that's personal choice. I prefer the clips. There's different kinds of clips as well. Some are built for, and there's actually a difference between mountain bike and road bike. I have never tested out road bike clips, but I imagine you're a little more attached. It takes a little more effort to get out of them.
Well, you were saying that you just put your mountain bike clips on
Yep.
your road bike.
Yep, I use the same exact pedals on my mountain bike as my road bike. That way I don't have to change my shoes. I wear the same shoes. They're mountain bike shoes, so they got a little tread on the bottom if you're walking through the mud or something. So maybe you get some lighter shoes or smoother shoes or something if you're road biking. But mine are really easy, And the interesting thing I found out recently on mine is the way they're built. So I have Time Attacks. Time is the brand. Attack is the model. And depending on whether you put one clip on the one foot and the other on the other, you can actually swap them and get a different angle where you're that you need to bump out your foot in order to unclip. So one might be a lot wider, so it's a little harder to unclip.
Right.
Mine, I put on that narrow setting. I want to be able to unclip right away.
Right.
Now, if you can unclip too quickly too. If you go over a bump, like sometimes my clips come out. Usually that's more indicative of wearing out your pedals or your clips. Is when you're going to run into that issue more so.
Right. Right.
But yeah, definitely another thing to consider. Do you want clips? But that's not something you need to know right away either. You can
Mm-hmm.
always change out your pedals. It's easy. You put a wrench on it and you turn your pedal. I mean,
Right.
anyone could do it if you have the right size wrench. It's not a hard thing to do. At some point, hey, I'm getting used to this bike. I want to try clipless pedals. Go for it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
buy a set of shoes, buy a set of pedals, and put them on, test them out, or do what I did and borrow your brother's.
Yeah.
Test them out. Find somebody test them out for a trip, and you like them. I'd say go for it.
Yeah.
I think it's the best scenario.
I'll tell you what, Alex. We're about running out of time here.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just. Well, I guess the thing that I didn't really know is just how involved. Well, I guess not necessarily how involved biking is, but more so like the the trails, sort of say, that you could kind of go off of, whether you want to go more road biking esque or but more mountain biking or anything. It's kind of crazy to me, and I guess more so from the beginner standpoint, like what we touched on earlier, is figure that out first. Figure out what you want to do first. And don't buy a bike and then figure it out later.
Right. No, you definitely want to know what type of riding you're gonna do, even if it's hypotheticals. At least some idea. Like, this is what I want to do, but I might also do this.
Mm-hmm.
And now, if it's road biking, like, I'm a hardcore road biker, and I might want to do some mountain biking. Well, you might want to think about buying a different bike.
Right.
You might be like I have right now. I have a dedicated road bike and I have a dedicated mountain bike.
Mm-hmm.
And I think anything in between, I can kind of pick and choose depending on what it is.
Right. That's it. I mean,
I don't do a lot in between, but if I wanted to, I could go on a rails trail on either one of those bikes,
Right.
really.
Right.
And I could change the tires on my road bike to be a little thicker tire if I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to. So there's a lot of variables you can change even after you have the bike, but
Right.
you kind of want to have the frame picked out
Right,
ahead
right.
of time. And you want to know the range that you're in, price range versus skill level,
Right.
or difficulty, what you're gonna hit with it.
Yeah.
And I gave a little bit of that range earlier, and that's about as good as I can tell you right now.
Right.
I haven't bought that many bikes.
Well, I mean, as much as you're gonna tell us is always just enough. So, appreciate your time, Alex.
Yeah,
I hope
thanks
to
for
do it
having me
again.
on.
Hope that, I mean, heck, it might be even down in North Carolina
Yeah.
next time we do this. But I hope we get a chance to ride together sometime soon and
Absolutely.
go from there. But thanks again, dude.
Yep.